Hello, this is Father Marty Smith, sitting with longtime parishioner John Thurston today, and in anticipation of our upcoming 150th celebration of the consecration of St. Francis Church, we're taking these opportunities, and John has very graciously agreed to meet with me to tell and reminisce about some of the stories of memories he's had of decades past here at St. Francis. So thank you for joining today, John, and thank you. It's a great pleasure to have you here. And to get started this morning, I remember you mentioning something about early morning Christmas Mass with your family. So why don't you tell us that story?
Okay, well, first of all, Father, I'd like to tell you about my family. My father was William H. Thurston, and my mother was Thelma Brown Thurston, and there was 5 of us children, 4 boys and 1 girl. And I happen to be the youngest. My oldest brother is 96, and the next brother is still 94, and I'll be 88 in August if I'm still here. But my first memory of St. Francis was I was 4 years old, and we were walking to 5 o'clock Mass. Father Clancy liked Christmas Mass at 5 o'clock. And it was 4:30, and we walked from Henry Street to St. Francis. And there was Mom and Dad and my brother Jim and I. And when we first walked in the door to St. Francis Church, my brother Jim says, "John, don't touch the rope." There was a rope there for the bell.
Oh, okay.
And the bell is 3,000 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
So anyway, Mom come back and grabbed my hand, and we went over and sat down to the last pew in the church, because Christmas Mass, it was always filled. And there was pew rent. People paid rent for sitting in the pew.
Oh, okay.
And we didn't, so we sat in the back seat as far as we could get.
Sure.
Because if you were sitting in the pew, and the people that paid the rent would show up, you were expected to get up
and move. Okay.
and hope you could find an oven somewhere.
Sure.
But I didn't understand much about the Mass because it was in Latin then, of course. But we went to Mass, come home, and went our way. But then I went from there into remembering starting school.
Okay.
And I started school in 1939, and we had 3 classrooms: the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, and the 7th and 8th. And you think that was a little different, but if you stop and think in the county, there was probably 12 schools out there for the people in the country that had 1 room.
Sure.
So we were blessed in one way.
Absolutely.
And we had 4 nuns, and on the last of the month, Father Clancy would come over and read our report card. And we wasn't graded on A, B's, and C's. It was 70s, 80s, 90s, or 100.
Okay.
And if it was below 70s, you
were in trouble.
But anyway, he would go through the whole report card, read out loud to everyone in the room. They knew what you were getting. And then he'd give you the card, and you'd take it home and get it signed and bring it back and wait for next month.
Oh, okay.
So, but then I remember the school had every fall, they would, Father would get the farmers with trucks.
Okay.
And they would go down to the railroad and unload the coal for the whole winter.
Oh, okay.
And there was a caravan of trucks coming in at the school, the nun's house, the priest's house, and what's the other one? There was 4 of them.
For the church and then...
Yeah, the church.
Okay,
yes, of
sure.
But the farmers would show up and anybody else that could work, and it was all lump coal.
Okay.
So they could build a fire overnight, kind of have a little early in the morning, then they could build to it.
Sure.
But as the years went by, they went to stoker, which was a lot easier. And the coal come in handy on the playground. I know Rita Hennigan told you about the swing sets and everything out there, but she didn't tell you about the basketball. We had one backboard with a ring on it and no net.
Okay.
But in the spring of the year, you go out there, this was just north of the swing set. The ground would be mud and coal ash.
Oh, gosh.
And if it rained, it was messy.
Oh, I bet.
But in the fall or winter, you had the mess, but you had footprints in there, frozen footprints, and try to dribble a basketball with those frozen footprints. You imagine where the ball was going to go.
Sure.
So we didn't have, so the farmers, they worked hard, and they was in there before school started, and they was there till dark. And if they didn't have it all unloaded, Father would order 1 or 2 coal cars. It depended how much coal they needed, of course, about the same time every year. But they would work till noon, but I don't know if it was the Alder Society at that time. I know it was the ladies of the parish.
Sure.
And they put on a big feed for the workers. And once me and another young lad tried to go over and get something to eat, and it didn't work. So anyway, they'd work and they'd have enough coal to last them all winter long.
Okay.
In all 4 spots. And the next thing comes to my mind is once ever so often we would have a Coke Day, Coca-Cola.
Okay.
And Bill the Coke man, he would come, and everyone in school would get a free bottle of Coke.
Okay.
And if you wanted any other Coke, you'd walk across the street to the Imperial Filling Station, pay a nickel for a bottle of Coke. But you didn't have any soda machines, or didn't have any coolers.
Sure.
At that time, everybody had ice.
Okay.
And so the kids today, they probably have about, well, I don't know how many machines in the school.
Sure.
But it was different then.
Sure.
And they would be careful at Father's house over there, which was said it had 12 rooms in it. But Father had a garage, a brick garage, and it looked more like shape of a barn.
Okay.
It was all brick, but it had shape of a barn.
So there was a garage that kind of looked like a barn.
Yes, it was more shaped. It didn't look like the garages of today.
Sure.
And Father had his limousine, I would call it. It was shining all the time. And he would run it on wooden planks to keep it off the ground, to keep the tires in good shape from rotting, I guess.
Okay.
But he would get the older boys over to push it out. And when he come in, he'd get them to push it in instead of just driving it in. So But if you would see Father, and he had a maid, Miss Minnie. She come from Ireland, and she was, I never heard her talk. Jim and I brought some rolls to them. Mom made some bread and rolls for the nuns and for the priests, two priests, Father Kleinstein, his assistant, and Miss Minnie. And she'd crack the door and she'd take the bread, but she wouldn't say thank you or anything. She'd just kind of smile and close the door. So I never did hear her talk.
Oh, okay.
But she was a servant that really stayed with Father Clancy.
Okay.
But if you'd see him going down the road, he'd take her for a ride once in a while in the evening. And the father would be sitting all real straight up in that car going down maybe through Main Street, you know, and if you saw her and started waving at him, if she was looking at you, she'd see you waving, she'd turn her head straight and just sit there straight ahead. And to this day, I see some movies about Dick Van Dyke and some of his automobiles, and it kind of reminds me of Father Clancy and Miss Minnie.
That's funny.
So it's,
cruising down Main Street in that big Buick.
Down Main Street, yeah. But we took a lot of bread and roast to them here.
Okay.
So I'd like to tell you now about one of my neighbors.
Okay.
And he was born in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Okay.
And he was brought to Jerseyville at a very early age. And he was being raised, they brought him up to be raised with his grandparents. And England was their name, his grandfather. So they were Catholic. And when he started to school, they enrolled him in St. Francis.
Okay.
So he went all through St. Francis grade school. And he graduated in 1936. And he left there and he went to the high school, which was Jersey Township High School at that time. He played football, he loved football, and he graduated in 1940.
Okay.
Well, 1940, things still wasn't the shape in America that it could be for the Depression, you know. So after high school, he went and joined the United States Marine Corps.
Okay.
And he went out somewhere, I imagine California, and he went through camp, boot camp. He come home on leave, and everybody wanted to know what he was going to do in the Marine Corps. He says, well, I don't know where I'm going right now, but he says, when I go back to base, they will assign us to where we're going. And he went back, he come home and for a couple of weeks. And he walked around the neighborhood about every day, meeting people and talking to us. We did a lot of neighbor visiting back in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And the day before he went back, he put on his uniform and come around and tell everybody goodbye.
Okay. So the day before he went back.
Okay, he put on his dress uniform and he walked through telling the neighbors that he was going back tomorrow. And when he come to our house, their mom was outside and we had a lot of fruit trees in the yard. And Bob come by and picked one of the June apples. And he said, Mrs. Thurston, he said, I took one of your apples. And she said, well, that's fine, Robert, that's fine. And she wanted to know if he knew where he was going, and he said, no, we'll find that out when I get back to base. So when he got back to base, he wrote to his grandparents and told them that he'd been assigned to the Pacific Fleet. And the Pacific Fleet consisted of a lot of ships. Well, he was assigned to one of the prides of the fleet. It was a big battleship. And he loved his duty on the battleship, but he loved his liberties better because most of his liberties was in Hawaii.
Okay.
And they had the battleships there in Hawaii. They had a harbor there that was deep. And when they come in, they didn't have to anchor out. They could go right to the pier and secure the ship there.
Mm-hmm.
Which was real good because otherwise they'd have to be going in with smaller boats,
Sure.
in and out,
Mm-hmm.
day and night, that kind of stuff. So everything was real good till one Sunday morning, a little after 8 o'clock, that things changed. They were attacked by the Japanese. They started bombing and strafing. They started World War II, is what happened. Okay, well, they come in there and start the bombing, and of course, on a big ship, your personnel is below decks. And I guess apparently a bomb hit the right spot to hit the black powder magazine and did a lot of damage. Well, they ended up sinking 2 or 3 battleships at the harbor. I think maybe one limped out. I'm not sure about that. But Bob was apparently killed at that action because his body has never been found.
Oh my goodness.
He's listed as being one that was below deck and still on the USS Arizona.
Wow.
December the 7th. That shook our neighborhood and it shook the world. Because we knew Bob was on that ship. And after a while, and everything was settled down, Father Clancy had his funeral mass in Jerseyville for Bob. And I imagine it was the first time that Father ever had a funeral mass without a body.
Sure.
I don't know. But if anybody seeing this knows anybody going to Pearl Harbor, Robert's name is on the monument.
Okay.
It's Robert England Wendell.
Okay.
Wendell is not spelled like the windows today here. His Wendell name is W-I-N-D-L-E.
Okay.
So if anyone ever's going to Hawaii and wants to go to the Arizona, there's a St. Francis boy on there.
Oh wow. That's amazing.
So, and then the next thing, I had started to school, and the first priest I met that was not Father Clancy. Besides Father Clancy, I should say, was Father Brady.
Okay.
And I started in 39, but he always seemed to have a smile on his face, and he kind of, later on in life, I got thinking about it, and he kind of reminded me of Glenn Miller,
Okay.
the orchestra.
Yeah.
You know. But anyway, they started drafting after the Arizona, and it wasn't long Father Brady was in the service. And about everybody else that was of age. So Father Brady was liked in school, but anyway, he was gone, and I guess it was a year or so after that. And Mom's brother was in the Army. He was drafted, and he was on the Pacific somewhere. And one day I come in the house, and Mom had a letter in her hand, sitting down, which was unusual for her to be sitting down. And I said, "What's the matter, Mom?" She says, "John," she said, "I've got some bad news." I said, "What's that?" She said, "Father Brady has been killed." I said, "What?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "They killed our neighbor, and now they've killed our priest." She said, "What's next?" Well, Dad come home from work, read the letter, and I heard him say, "Thelma, let's take a walk." So they walked up to see Father Clancy, because he had said nothing about it.
Sure.
And he didn't know anything about it. But he read the letter. And after a while, he said, "Well, Bill, let's keep this to ourselves. We want to make sure it's official."
Sure.
And but some officer had told my Uncle Lee, Mom's brother, that a chaplain had been killed, and he lived close to St. Louis, small towns close to St. Louis. And somebody asked him, "Where about in Illinois?" And he said the town of Jerseyville. And he says, I believe his name was Brady. So that's how. But Dad come back from Father Clancy's with Mom, and they said, "This is not to leave this house, because it's not official. We don't want to store any rumors." And to this day, you're the only one that I know outside the family that's heard this.
Wow.
So anyway, everybody was drafted of age. My brother was drafted, Bill. He spent his time in a hospital in San Diego as a pharmacist mate, taking care of the wounded. My brother Richard, he was graduating from high school. Instead of waiting for his diploma, he went and joined the Navy, and they sent him to Guam. He unloaded and loaded ships over there, and they were getting ready for an invasion on Japan when they dropped the bomb.
Okay.
And it sure saved a lot of American lives. It was bad, but in one way, it saved a lot of lives too. So, anyway, the war ended. I'm going to go back to Robert Wendell. Robert lived in the England house, and the house just east of them was a family of 12 children.
Mm-hmm.
There was 8 boys and 4 girls. And all 8 of those boys served in World War II.
Oh my gosh.
And they all come home.
Wow. Wow.
There was 5 in the Army, 2 in the Navy, and 1 in the Marines.
Wow.
And they all made it home.
Oh my goodness.
That's remarkable.
That is very remarkable.
Yes.
That's...
Yeah. And the names were weddings.
So John, tell me the story about when you were on leave from the Navy.
Okay, Father, in 1953, I come home on leave, and it was early summer.
Okay.
And on the weekend, Sunday, after Mass, we was having a baptism with Father Clancy. And after Mass is over with, and the baptism was over with, we were standing around kind of talking and laughing and this and that, and Father Clancy come up to me, and I was, of course, in my dress whites. And he said, which one are you? And I said, I'm John Thurston, Father. I said, I'm the youngest of the family. And he looked at me and he says, what bakery do you work for? And I said, I looked at him kind of funny, and I said, Father, I don't work at any bakery. I said, I'm in the United States Navy. And he kind of looked and said, oh, fine boy, fine boy. And he walked off.
Oh my goodness.
And I didn't see Father Clancy probably till after I got out of the Navy in '56. And I hadn't seen him. It was several years after that I had seen him, because my fiance then was working in Alton, and I was going to Alton quite a bit.
Okay.
So
sure.
that was about the end of Father Clancy and me.
Oh
but
my.
that's something to remember me by.
That's
Yeah.
such a great story. And John, thank you for sharing all the stories that you did with me today. I know that you have so many experiences and so many stories that could be shared, but I thank you for selecting some of those to share with all of us today. And, you know, on this commemoration of the 150th of St. Francis that we will be celebrating on July the 4th of this upcoming weekend. St. Francis was, of course, consecrated as a church on July the 4th, 1871. But thank you for sharing your memories of your experiences with Father Clancy and in the parish, and thank you for your service in the military on this July the 4th weekend.
Well, Father, I'm honored to live as long as I have and been a member all my life to St. Francis.
Well, that's wonderful, and we will continue to pray for many more years, and we just absolutely love you and your whole family. So thank you again, and for anybody watching, if you have any stories that you want to share, as I mentioned at Mass before, always feel free to write those down, send them in to the office so we can keep records of these amazing stories. So many that from different experiences, different people throughout the years of our parish here in Jerseyville, Illinois. So thank you again, John, and I hope you have a wonderful 4th of July weekend, and look forward to having you present for the celebration this weekend.
I'll be here.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. God bless. Bye-bye.